Gerald told me all about that night, how he was making out with Tiffany, but then as soon as she said she didn't do blowjobs, just think, maybe if she did do blowjobs, Gerald would still be alive.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Two Peas on a Podcast. Gerald is here with you, and the Marty to my McFly right over there is Nick. What's up, man?
I got this really, really weird sensation that someone is watching me, Gerald. I'm really not comfortable right now. If we could please get through this review as quickly as possible, because I got this weird feeling right now. I don't know what it is.
One hell of a backdrop you chose there for the video audience. Audio listeners are like, what the hell are these guys talking about? But
because I saw Gerald, audio audience, I looked at Gerald and it immediately was just like, no.
What's scarier? Well, we're reviewing Totally Killer tonight, an Amazon original horror film, a new slasher that just premiered on Amazon last week. And I wanted to do a lead up to Halloween, so we have a run on horror movies coming up here, and we're starting with Totally Killer. Totally. And yeah, totally we are. But before we do that, Nick, before we dive into the review, we always start every episode out with what we call one big question.
You gotta ask yourself a question.
I have a lot of questions. Number one, how dare you?
Yeah. How? I think I said that last week. I can't play the scene.
You always say it. No, that's fine.
Again.
We can't beat Kelly Kapoor at saying it either. So.
Getting stale here on the P's, folks. Sorry. It's all downhill from here already.
Why do we even try?
Our starting movie was The Flash. I mean, we were supposed to go nowhere but up from there. I mean,
yeah, we're good. We're good. Thank you for the intro there, Kelly Kapoor. Nobody could do it as good as her, though. So every week we come up with a question for each other that is somewhat inspired by the film that we are reviewing. Nick, did you want to throw a big question at me? I've got one for you.
All right. So now this is a movie about time travel, but it's also a slasher movie, Gerald. So I want to know, I'm putting the horror guy on the spot. Horror episode here on the P's. I'm putting the horror guy on the spot.
All right.
You're Jamie in this movie. What franchise, what horror franchise would you want to travel back in time to be part of, like, the very beginning thing? I know that's not really what this movie is, but I decided to take it in that direction because I'm like, what would the horror guy, what franchise would the horror guy want to go back and be part of from the beginning?
Okay, let me ask.
And possibly get stabbed, slashed, murdered, killed, destroyed, crushed.
So when you ask this question, then you mean I'm going to go back and be living within the
you're living
confines
within it,
of the movie.
Yeah, you got to be in it.
Okay,
you got to be in it.
I didn't know if you meant going back and experiencing when it was released or like.
No. That's
okay,
that. We'll be here all night. Jeez.
All right. Oh man, it's tough because you don't really want to say because I'm going to die in any of these. Let's be honest.
That's true.
I mean, I'm not going to live through any of these. I guess I would say the Scream franchise. How about that? Because I feel like, especially with the original Scream with Billy and Stu, I feel like I would kind of fit in with those dudes. I graduated high school in 94. That movie came out in 96. So the 90s, all the humor hit with me. So maybe I could, survive. Maybe they would spare me because they'd be like, this guy's, he's one of us,
Because you'd be sitting there,
I don't know.
like joking around with them the whole time when they're like, "Ooh, it's all the rules about horror movies and stuff." And you'd be like, "Oh yeah, man, did you ever see this movie where they did this and this?" And then you'd have all this future horror movie knowledge too that you'd be like, "Man, well, what if there was a horror movie that did this and it was something that hasn't come out as of that time yet, and you could even go further." Man, all right.
I'm into it. Yeah, I mean,
Then
maybe.
they'd stab you for knowing too much and thinking you know everything about horror movies. It'd be literally the flip side.
We got to get rid of this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Scream for me. What about you? You don't really do horror, though, but is there one that you would maybe venture at taking a stab at? See what I did there?
God, I'm gonna vote for John Carpenter's The Thing
Okay.
Just so I can be far away from you in this moment right now in Antarctica, frozen to death somewhere, and not have had to heard like like
That was
that
pretty
joke,
good, I thought.
like that
That was
joke
pretty good.
right there. Like, no, if I could just go back and erase that one from existence.
Nah, I thought it went really well. I thought that was pretty good, pretty good comedic timing on my part. All right, so my one big question for you, buddy, is also dealing with time travel. Obviously inspired by the movie Totally Killer and a lot of other films that have tackled the subject. But I kind of wanted, and it came up in our fan feedback too a little bit that we'll get to later. A couple fans had similar kind of time travel related questions, but mine's somewhat different.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could travel back in time in the past in your own life and witness something that happened to you or it was very important to you or to someone you love, and you could just kind of be there and just watch it happen. Not necessarily experience it all over again, but you just want to be there as kind of like a bystander to watch that particular event in your life. Kind of like think kind of like Ebenezer Scrooge and the Ghost of Christmas Past, kind of where he goes and watches different things that have happened throughout his life. What would you like to witness?
Oh God, I'm trying to think of like, do I want to take this in a good direction or like
Oh God,
a bad direction?
Oh God,
Like, I mean,
that's a deep question, though, right?
like the masochistic part of me is like, what if I went back in time and like watched myself get into the relationship and marriage that I got into in the 2010s, and it would be like me, like Grandpa Simpson, like beating on the glass at the church, being like, Mrs. Bouvier, like desperately tried to stop myself, even though I can't interfere. Or like,
right.
I'm gonna try to take it in a happier direction than that, though. I think.
Okay.
And just give me like name a moment with my kids, like any of the times I got to, especially when they were young. I mean, my kids are grown now. My youngest is 20, so I mean, it's like, give me any of those moments, like. When I held my youngest son and I put him in a cooking pot on the stove, he was like a couple months old probably, because I was going to make Knorr stew or something like that. Like, like all the different times, like watching Ed, and Eddie with my little toddlers, running around when they were like really young and stuff like that. Like literally, I mean, just to see my kids in those moments again, man. I mean, that would be no big event or no occurrence that's happened in my life is going to measure up to seeing that again. So I got to go that.
Yeah,
I go with that.
That's awesome. I approve of
that.
that answer. I can't. I mean, that's great. For me, it's kind of weird because like I spent some time with my sister this weekend, and it kind of got me thinking that when I thought of this question, what would I say and what would my answer be? And ironically, it's going to be when my folks brought my sister home from the hospital. I'm 5 years older than she was. It's my earliest memory. I was 5, and it's the first thing I can remember. Like, it's as far back as I can. I can't remember anything before that. So just to like be there now as like an adult and aware, and just kind of watch, what 5-year-old me, kind of how I reacted to having this baby sister brought home. And like I said, I do remember it, but obviously it's kind of hazy. All right, Nick. So now that we've wrapped up one big question, we're of course going to get into our discussion of Totally Killer, the review this week.
Totally.
Now, I get really excited to talk about horror movies. So we'll kind of see.
Wait, since when?
We'll kind of see what, it's just a recent thing. Don't worry.
Mia Goth's not even in it, Gerald.
I know, right? It could have used her, though. Oh, okay. Hold that thought.
Wow.
All right. But before we get into the discussion, we do our score reveal up front. Out of 10.
Damn it. This always happens. I think I'm going to score, and then I never score. It's not fair.
All right. Out of 10, me and Nick, our individual scores. We have not discussed this with each other. You ready, buddy?
I'm going to stab you with this one in 3, 2, 1. Stab. 7 out of 10.
5.
Wow. There's even a sad face.
10.
Audio audience, there's a sad face on his little journal that he has. He put a little frowny, sad face on there.
I am really excited that you get to be the one to champion this movie tonight.
Well,
There's some things I liked about it. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, 5 out of 10 from me, a 7 out of 10 from Nick, which, oh god, I think is a 6 for the P's. I'm
not even gonna help you anymore. I'm not even gonna help you.
Right. So a 6 out of 10 from the P's cumulatively. Totally Killer. Real quick, let me read the synopsis on Letterboxd. 35 years after the shocking murders of 3 teens, an infamous killer returns on Halloween night to claim a 4th victim. When 17-year-old Jamie comes face to face with the masked maniac, she accidentally time travels back to 1987, and she's forced to navigate the unfamiliar culture. She teams up with her teenage mother to take down the psycho once and for all. So we're dealing with a time travel movie. We're dealing with a slasher film. And it is, I don't know, you tell me, man. 7 out of 10 from you. First of all, I'm shocked. I did not see that one coming. Why such a high score from you on this film? Spoiler-free thoughts here at the top.
Such a high. That's like my I liked it score. Like it's
but for you, it's pretty
good.
high.
It's good. Like it's decent. Like I got some really good laughs out of it. I think the best parts of the film are when Kiernan Shipka's character Jamie is back in the 80s, and of course she's a very, very fish out of water. Like she is, of course, like raised in this culture where, you know, like you can't like grab people inappropriately and like, you know, like all these different things, and like those kind of cultural commentaries and things like that were really funny to me. I really loved her just kind of being like standing there at the because what I think that the film doesn't do is I don't think it's necessarily condemning the 80s for being what the 80s were, and the film very easily could have gone into that territory, but it plays it for laughs instead. It's not necessarily condemning it and saying, oh my god, this was so bad, oh my god, this was so wrong, or whatever. Kind of made me nostalgic for Dodgeball, I'm not gonna lie. That sequence was really, really fun. Like I said, it was enjoyable, it was fine. This movie's trying to take you on a little bit of a ride. I think you just have to kind of roll with it. I think when it does get horror-ish and when it does get brutal, it's brutal AF. I really, really think it leans into like those kind of slasher things whenever it really, really goes for it, like those kind of slasher tropes. You know, I think it swings for the fences. I don't think it hits out of the park every single time. I had some big problems with a couple parts of this movie that we'll talk about, obviously, but it was enjoyable, and I laughed quite a bit. Like I laughed quite a bit at like just how like randomly, like even after like a absolute brutal murder, like they could swing a joke in there, you know, about whatever, and I could still laugh about it. So I enjoyed that a lot.
I did like it. To your point, I did like how the tone of the movie was pretty consistently kind of comedic. Like it never really got too serious or like too dark. I mean, there was some dark shit in there, obviously, when you're thinking of these murders, you know, if they were to actually happen in your town or whatever, it's a pretty dark thing. But just as far as the tone goes, it definitely stuck with its horror comedy kind of tag, which I did appreciate.
Yep.
I'm glad it wasn't kind of all over the place tonally. And it was funny for me too. Like I did giggle at, you know, certain references and one-liners, and mostly the stuff in the 80s, like you said, like all the jock dudes in the 80s and how they were so stereotypically that way. And, you know, I was around in the 80s, so I remember a lot of that stuff and a lot of those guys at my middle and high school. So what kind of hurt this movie for me, I don't really know, to be honest, but it may be perhaps expectations for this film, because there's this new kind of subgenre in horror in the last 5 years or so. And I'm just going to throw some titles out and see if you've seen them, Nick. I'm assuming you've heard of all of them, but I'm not sure what you've seen. Have you seen any of the Happy Death Day films?
No.
Okay.
I'm aware of them, though. That's like the Groundhog Day slasher type. Okay,
Yep. Have you seen Freaky with Vince Vaughn?
No.
Came out a couple years ago. So that's the one that's the body switch, like Freaky Friday.
Right. Yeah, he swaps with like a little girl or something, right? And he's like a crazy killer or something.
Right.
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah.
So then the 17-year-old blonde girl becomes the, you know, killer, and he's this teenage girl or whatever. So those movies I absolutely love. There's 2 Happy Death Day films. There's a sequel and there's the original, and then Freaky. So what's weird about Totally Killer is that I wanted to love it as much as I love those, and I just didn't. it fell kind of flat for me, honestly. Like I saw all these letterbox reviews and all my friends that had seen it and they're like 4 stars, 4.5 stars, like such a blast, like all this. And I'm watching, I'm going, I mean, it's okay. I mean, it's fine. So I think the expectations really hurt this one for me, and I wanted it to be so much better. I also didn't really like the kind of caricature of the 80s that this movie kind of presented. It was more like it was kind of it was almost like you went to see a play at a high school or something that takes place in the 80s. Like, how would this kids put on this show, And they would just try to do everything that was so neon and so loud, and that's not really the 80s, man. Like, that might be a little snapshot, but like this was like everything from the Olivia Newton-John videos in this movie when it comes to like the 80s wardrobes and stuff. And that's just not the 80s to me. Like, I think it's really hard to pull off, honestly, but I feel like, like Stranger Things did really well. Takes place in the 80s, and that's a much more like muted, kind of grounded, like real kind of depiction of the 80s. But I love stuff taking place in the 80s. I love the music from the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
But I just felt like this went a little too far with like the stereotypical stuff that, leg warmers and like, she meets that one mom in the park when she transfers back, and she's like in a full leotard with a jean jacket. I mean, like, I get it, but like, what I'm saying? That's just like a snapshot, and they tried to make that the whole kind of backdrop when she was in the 80s. Do you want to peel back the spoiler warning real quick?
So let me, like, it didn't like tinge any nostalgia bells for you when she pulled up with the station wagon just full of smoke because the mom was just like chain smoking in the car with the kids. Because like I 100p grew up like that. I know exactly what that was like. So like that definitely,
no, that's true.
Took me back. Here, let me disagree with you first, and then we'll pull back the spoiler.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
I think that this movie is an exaggerated, over the top, kind of tongue in cheek horror slasher comedy, like with a time travel element. Like, it's clearly aiming for a little bit over the top. It's clearly trying to go like a little bit over the top. Like, it's got like the super brutal horror elements to it, like I said, which I really, really enjoyed, to be 100% honest. But I really, really think the film was not taking itself too seriously, and it was trying to be a little bit over the top. And I think that's why it was so drenched in the 80s and not just like whatever. Like, I think it exaggerated those aspects of the 80s because I think everything about this movie is exaggerated. I really think everything about it was really, really like exaggerated. But yeah, I mean, we can pull that spoiler wall back if you're ready.
Yes, because there's a couple other things I wanted to mention, but it's going to be kind of somewhat spoilery. So going forward, guys, anything that we talk about could spoil totally killer for you. So if you have not seen it, come back after you see the movie or fast forward ahead to the end of this discussion. So a couple other things that I wanted to mention that kind of hurt the movie for me overall was I knew the killer immediately, and it ended up being true. Like, I 100% was like, this dude is going to end up being the killer, and it was. And I'm talking about in present day, not in the 80s.
Right. I liked the twist, though. Did you like the twist that it wasn't the same person in both time periods, and that like it made sense why it was the one kid in the 80s, and then it made sense why it was the older guy?
Oh, you mean because that's another thing too. They kind of crammed that in at the end, though. Like you talking about with the black guy that was the killer in 87.
Well, I think so. Do I think that this movie is underdeveloped and that it really needed a little bit more time to kind of bake and develop a little bit more of this stuff? Yes, I agree with you 100% there, if that's what you're saying. But I did like that idea that it wasn't the same killer in the past and in the present.
Like an older version of him or whatever.
Yeah, that's what I liked. Like, they even made a joke about it because they were just like, but that can't be Doug. Like, we just killed teenage Doug. It can't be older Doug.
Right.
And I liked that they played with that idea. Because he wasn't a serial killer. Like, he literally was just like doing revenge kills because like they like they didn't drug, but like they got like his girlfriend really, really drunk and then like sent her on her way, and then she died. So he took revenge on the 3 girls that did it, and then that was it. And then like, because this whole thing was like completely unsolved, then you have like, I mean, of course,
the podcasting stuff was
leave it to Hollywood. Every podcaster in a movie is literally the worst person ever. They're conspiracy theorists. They're serial killers. They're
Sure.
terrible. They're shady, cagey, really terrible, crappy, horrible people. Which I can attest to in real life. That's definitely true. You're all the worst. You're not. You're wonderful, and I love you so much.
You guys are all
really,
great.
Really do. But yeah, like I did like that it wasn't just an older version of him. I liked that it was kind of,
I did too.
Those were two disassociated things, and I really did like that, and I thought both of those made sense for their own motivations to be the killer.
Yeah, I got no problem with that either. I would much rather it have been that than had been just an older version of himself, because then you get into even more of a disconnect with logic, because if he's dead, how is he back? You know, he should have died in 87, and then it's like he wouldn't even have been there anyway, if you're talking about like reality, you know? So now this movie has a lot of breaks in logic that you just kind of have to overlook.
You have to. It's a time travel movie.
To be the case with all time travel movies.
You cannot ever like sit here and like seriously critically analyze and be like, but that wouldn't happen. You got to just accept it for what it is. It's a time travel movie. It's going to have logical paradoxes and stuff like that don't make sense.
Another thing that kind of got me off on the wrong foot with this movie, and I mean from like the very beginning, like the first like 5 or 10 minutes, was like, it just didn't seem like the type of production value that I was looking for. Like, it kind of felt like a Disney Channel movie, like the way it kind of looked. I don't know if you know what I'm saying there, but like it just seemed a little underdeveloped in terms of like the technical aspects, and it kind of just kept taking me out of it, like as I was watching it. And then like, you know, like for example, like all the scenes with her putting together the time machine in the photo booth or whatever, there was a lot of that like weird kind of lightning and stuff, but it was like they did it in iMovie. I don't know. But like kind of like shit like that. Like, I mean, I feel bad critiquing that, but like I feel bad critiquing that, but I'm just being honest with you that it kind of took me out of it a couple times when those scenes would come up, and I'd be like, wow, this looks really like...
I'm confused by this take from you, because I know you like some no-budge stuff that just looks like it looks like a student film project with like the cheesiest stuff ever. So I'm really surprised that you're coming at this movie with that heat. I'm really surprised to hear that.
But most of those are a product of their time too, though. I'm not even saying that like I hated it or whatever. I'm just saying that it like made me stop and pause for a minute.
I'm legitimately, I gotta say, I'm surprised to hear you bringing this kind of heat to this movie.
Well,
I really expected you to like this more. Like this, I think this thing had its tongue planted firmly in its cheek.
It's mid for me.
I enjoyed that aspect of it. Like, listen, audience, all right, I'm not the horror guy, all right? Yeah. So I'm just, okay. I very generally dislike horror movies, like, as a rule, because I really hate horror movie tropes. They're often very, very overplayed. You know, I really didn't dislike anything in this one. And you know what? And I really liked that. Like, there's that one scene when he's fighting Julie Bowen, the mom's character, and Julie Bowen can still get it, son. Oh,
right. Yeah.
Although it's weird seeing her married to anybody but Phil Dunphy. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that would have been a pretty sweet casting if they could have got both of them.
Yo, get Ty Burrell in there. That would have been great, man. That would have been perfect. Awesome. But like, anyway, like there's that scene where like he runs out the front door or whatever, like during that battle, which I thought was shot really well. Like, I really liked like slamming on the tables and like all the different things and like chasing after, like doing all this stuff. And then he just like leaves out the front door. Like, you're just kind of watching that POV shot, like past her, like out the front door. And then all of a sudden he comes in the back door, like, and the battle's right back on and everything like that. And I didn't think they were going to kill her. I thought it was going to be like, that's Julie Bowen, man. That's like, you can't kill Claire Dunphy like this. You can't do Claire dirty like this. Although I did think it was really, really funny that it was Julie Bowen on like Halloween, because if you watch Modern Family, you get it. Never mind. That's not even the point. But like, I didn't think they were going to kill her. And I thought, obviously, we're in a little Scream influence on its sleeve there with, you know, probably the biggest name actress in the movie, I would think. Yeah. I'm looking back at the cast list. And yeah, no, I mean, aside from Randall Park, but I mean, Randall Park,
he's awesome in this, by the way. I fucking love him.
He's from, I mean, he really cut his teeth in Fresh Off the Boat, which is Nachaka Khan's, like, one of her biggest claims to fame.
Oh, I didn't know
Was
that actually.
yeah. So
Okay.
that's where I'm really the most familiar with Randall Park from, is from Fresh Off the Boat, which she created. So I
Okay, I
was
didn't know
nice.
that connection there. That makes
Yeah.
a lot of sense why he was in there now. But I loved him as the cop in this
Oh,
movie.
I loved him too. I
Yeah,
really did,
oh,
and I
he's
just
so good.
yeah I
Did
yeah.
you let me ask you because I touched on it earlier and I meant to get your opinion. Did you kind of figure out the podcaster tie-in killer, or was that a surprise to you when you found out the reveal?
So I for sure. I mean, he's just skeevy AF. Like, you just get an off vibe from him, like from the word jump.
Hmm.
And then, like, they go back in time. They go back to 87. But then they kept having these other scenes that were set in present day. And I
Yeah.
kept wondering what the point of them was, because I was just like, this isn't really necessary to the movie. Like, why is it wasting time doing, like, if she can get back from that time by, doing whatever kind of thing, like if she can still get back from like her time or doing whatever. Also, turn your phone off. Why you even got your phone on if it's in the 80s? You ain't got no Wi-Fi signal.
Right, right,
Turn
right.
your phone
Yeah.
off. But nevertheless, like I was like, why are they doing this? Why do they keep cutting back to this? And
Well, they had the two plots kind of intertwining with each other, present day and 87, because like she left a note for her in the photos. I can't remember what it said, but anyway,
yeah, like
uh,
stab the machine or stab like the
yeah,
knife
yeah,
the
yeah.
machine or whatever. I can't remember what the note said, but like the whole time I'm watching it, I'm just like, but even with that, it's ancillary. Like, it's not as important. Because like I didn't even remember seeing her leave that note. I might have like turned away from the screen or something like
No,
that.
she
Because
did. They didn't show it. It was
yeah,
just it
which
was just in one of the pictures.
which I don't think is great, like, storytelling. Like, if you want those scenes to contextually make sense, and if you want to continue to build the present day narrative alongside of it, a quick scene of her being like, if I'm changing things right now, or if things are not happening the way that they originally happened,
Hmm.
maybe I can communicate with, my friend in the future who can like try to do whatever. Like, that would have taken like 30 seconds to set up, and to have that not in here is weird. So the whole time I was like, why is this all in here? And then having to have, basically, when you get the reveal that it's the podcaster guy who has stolen the time machine and come back to finish what he started or whatever.
Hmm.
Like, I was like, you really had to set up this whole B plot of like the girl trying to build a new time machine in the future just to have this moment. Like, that feels really, really artificial to me. I really wish they would have come up with a better way to bring the like maybe he was like on the clinging to the side of the time machine or something. Like, it's like Doctor Who and he's riding on the outside of the TARDIS or whatever. I don't
Sure.
know
Yeah. Yeah.
anything else, like, because I still feel like that's really, really just like you had to take all this time to devote all this like extra screen time to this B plot of the girl building the time machine just to deliver the character, the killer, back in time at the right moment. It's
Hmm.
like in the I didn't watch the second Venom movie because I hated the first one so much, but it's like in the first Venom movie how they legitimately just keep like the symbiote, like, that could fight against Venom in wherever it was, and it's like it literally just stays wherever it is in the movie until it's time for the plot to need it, and then like it's like write better. Like, I really, really
Right.
felt like that was not written as well. And I'll tell you something else that really, really, I almost dropped another point or two off of this, but I laughed enough during it that I left it at a 7.
Uh-huh.
You know what I really hate in time travel movies, Gerald? Like, more than anything?
What?
Obvious setups to reveals that they're going to do in the past. Like, when they're having like, oh, like she goes to like the boardwalk place, like the rundown amusement park, and it's like, oh, this used to be the hopping place in this town
Right.
back
Yeah.
in the day.
Sure. No.
It's
Yeah. I
like,
hate that
you
too.
don't have to deliberately write that stuff just to
Yeah.
set that stuff up. Just have them go there, and we're
And
going to pick
another
up
thing,
contextually that it's the same place.
and can I tell you that you just reminded me of another thing that I hated about this movie too, which kind of goes along with that, is they had that weird montage where like she goes back to 87 and she's at this party, and everybody that she encounters at the party, there's that weird iMovie editing again, where it like where it like meshes through to like the present day version of that person,
Right. It reminds you who
like,
they were in the future. Yeah.
and then it comes back. I'm like, we didn't really need that, especially for like Julie Bowen's character. Like, we get it. Like, that's your mom. Like, we know that, like, I don't know. I felt like it was kind of, it was definitely playing to like a dumb audience. Like, here, let me show you exactly what the references were, exactly who these people are. So
And I
I
would
don't know.
have
There's a
liked
lot
a
of
little
weird choices
more.
there.
I would have liked a little more struggling from Jamie's character. Like, obviously, her mom's just been brutally murdered. I
Mhm.
really, really would have liked to see her struggle a little bit more with the whole, oh, I
Dealing with
invented
that.
a time machine. Like, it's a very flippant, just kind of offhanded, well, yeah, it's my time machine. Of course, you can just use this to go back in time and stop your mom from dying, kind of thing. Like,
Hmm.
it's just very flippant, and it's just very like, I would have liked to see Jamie be like, what? Like, seriously? Like, no, like I like, just to be even dismissive of it, you can even still have the scene of her going through to the future, like, play out the same way. You can even still or the past, I'm sorry, you can still have that play out the same way, like where she's
Right.
struggling with the killer and ends up in it, and he stabs it, and it all of a sudden activates, and she's like, oh my god, it actually is a time machine, it actually does work. I would have liked to see some doubt from that character, like, especially like overwhelmed with grief from the loss of her mother. Like,
Right.
I felt like there was way more play, there was way more space they could have played in with
Yeah.
the family, with Jamie's character, especially like dealing with
They.
like the death of her mom before they ever get to the 87 part. I feel like, because that's the hook of this movie, right? We're going to travel back in time to 87 to try to stop the killer, like the first time or whatever. So the movie's almost trying to rush you to that point, and I feel like it needed to take a little bit more time, just spending more time with like the adult versions of these characters, you know?
Yeah. It did. It also did that thing that a lot of like whodunit horror movies. You mentioned it's being influenced by Scream, which I also agree with. But like, it did that thing where it kind of like would make you suspicious of certain characters. Like
Of course, yeah.
the dad was always kind of a through line where he was
Like
like,
Lurch.
yeah, right. Is he good? Is he, what's going on with this dude? And of course, he ends up being fine. But
That was one of those things where it was way too obvious that there was
right,
no way it was that kid. Like, it
right.
was way too obvious. Like, I get you
But
there. I feel you
but
there.
I think that also, because it was saying up front, like, we are a horror comedy. Like, this is meant to be funny with some like serious shit going on in terms of the plot, but this is supposed to be a fun watch. It's not supposed to like bring you down or make you even think very much. You're just supposed to be able to just kind of enjoy it as a comedic slasher film.
I've got another question for you too. Just while we're on here, while we're on the negative train, because this is the heat you've decided to bring to this episode.
Oh no.
So let me ask you this, because this is one thing I really am not a big fan of in horror movies either, especially like these kind of whodunit things where whatever. But do you like that they didn't reveal the backstory between Fat Trish and Doug until the moment they pulled the mask off of him and realized who the killer was? Like, where was that reveal or any other information about Doug? Like, I feel like the film purposely withholds information about that
So that you
in
can't
order to
figure it
make
out.
it a surprise that it's Doug
Mhm.
when they pull the mask off of him. And
Yeah, I hate it.
I kind of would have liked it to be more of like a who isn't it at this point? Like, it could literally be all these different people, like,
Right.
we don't know,
Right.
And I don't know. I did wonder, like, when they were spending like enough time with Doug, like during those scenes, I was like, who is this person? Like, what? Like,
Right. No,
like,
I hate
yeah.
I hate that too. I don't, and we kind of touched on that a little bit earlier, but I hate how they kind of crammed all that into like a 2 minute, thing with him standing around his body, basically. Like, it was just like, I was like, wait, what? Who's this guy? Who's Fat Trish? What happened at the party? Like, I don't, it was just like a lot of information that was just kind of like verbally, exposition just given to us after the fact, where it would have been, I agree with you. It's like, in other words, we mentioned Scream a few times tonight, but Scream is masterful at that, especially the first one, where it's like, really, it could have been Randy, it could have been Stu, it could have been Tatum. Like, all of them were kind of always involved in the plot, and until they were dead,
Scream even
you
gives
never.
you like the double sus where it like deliberately like implicates Billy and then seemingly exonerates
Right.
him, but then you find out the two killer twist at the end. Yeah.
Right. But it kind of, but you know what I mean? Like, until that person, it was like, if you ever played Clue, it was like you had the little Clue checklist and you couldn't really check their name off until they were dead because you didn't really know. You know what I mean? Everybody was kind of involved in the plot and could have been a suspect.
Yeah,
You know, everybody's a suspect. You know, Randy famously says that in the movie itself, which is very self-aware. So this movie kind of misses that a little bit. It's not quite as self-aware, and it doesn't really know when to kind of. It's making the audience a little. I want to say the word dumb. I feel bad saying that because I mean I feel like the target audience for this is just younger, and they probably didn't go through a lot of the slasher lore of the old days.
I feel like it's not asking its audience to do a lot of the heavy lifting on its own. I think it spells out everything really, really clearly for the audience. Like I said, except for like in the case of like who the killer's identity was, because of course they bring up Fat Trish, as they call her. And like they bring her up, but they don't like, why is that confrontation? Like, why is that discussion about like what actually happened to Fat Trish? Why is that like literally all that stuff is like literally like the last second, like after Doug is already dead? Like, I feel like we should have gotten more information to just kind of flesh the story out more before we get to that point. Cause then it, you know, like, because what the movie then has to do, God, I'm going to end up dropping my score. Knock it off.
I was going to say, you're doing my job for me. Keep going.
Like what the movie then has to do once it reveals to you that it's Doug is it then has to fill in all the plot holes for you and walk its way back to explaining to you how it could be Doug, because Doug's like so far out of left field as a suspect. I really dislike it when kind of mystery movies do that. I really, really wish that like give us something, give us anything, you know, like and whatever.
Another big miss for this movie too, and what hurt my score of it is I've already talked about how I wasn't a huge fan of the reveal and who ended up being the killer. I thought that was kind of lame. Also, I kind of figured it out, which sucks, but I didn't like how he just wasn't very menacing to me. It wasn't a menacing killer, even when he was in the mask and even when he was doing the killings. I don't know. It just didn't feel like he was a huge threat, like mentally to me as I was watching
it. Like any of the times he was on the screen there?
Not really. I don't know why. I don't know if it was the mask itself was kind of like Max Headroom-esque. I don't know. But I just never had that like fear of him as a killer. I'm talking about as an audience member. Of course, I'd be scared shitless if he was chasing me and my friends in the woods.
Right.
But like what I love about a lot of slashers, and we've mentioned Scream a lot tonight, but you know, even Jason and Friday the 13th, I mean, you can mention a lot of different like very popular slasher killers over the years. What I like about them and when I connect to them the most is when they have like an emotional connection to why they're doing it. You know, like they're directly connected on a personal level to their victims. You know, like we mentioned Billy from Scream, like he was obviously in it for the Sidney Prescott tie-in with his mom and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And all that reveal happens to us on a much more personal level, and you can tell that really is affecting him, which is why he's driven to do what he's doing. Whereas in this movie, it's just a podcaster guy that wants to get more downloads, essentially. I mean, you know, it's just I don't know, it's just lame to me. Like I just didn't. And, you know, I know we're going to be wrapping up here in a minute. So, I just want everybody to know, I didn't hate the movie. It's just a very mid movie for me. It's like the definition of like, it's okay. Like, I think it's a fun watch. I think you can have a good time with it. Some of the kills were pretty cool. I love the lead actress. You mentioned her earlier. Was it Kieran Shipka, right?
Yep. Kieran Shipka. Yep.
Yeah, she's great. A newcomer. I've seen her before. I think maybe I've seen her in some TV stuff. But this is the first like real feature role I'd ever seen her in. But I thought she did a really, really good job. I don't think this movie is cut from the same cloth as like Freaky and Happy Death Day. Those are much, much better in my opinion. But I think it's a fun watch. I think you can have a good time with it. But I just have a lot of problems with it overall. What about you in wrapping up, buddy?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm surprised. I really, really am surprised that you brought this kind of heat to it. Like I said, I really think it's definitely got its tongue planted firmly in its cheek. And it's having some fun while also trying to deliver like some pretty brutal horror and things like that. Yeah, I had fun with it. I laughed a lot. Like I said, I really enjoyed the fish out of water stuff of like her commenting as of like today's culture. but like in the 80s, but like I said, it's not. What I loved about that is it's not coming at the 80s, and a lot of people are so quick to go at the 80s, like it'd be like,
Mhm.
oh my god, this was terrible, and like condemn it and like how horrible it
Sure,
was and
yeah.
everything. But it's simultaneous, like that dodgeball scene, like it simultaneously kind of made you remember how fun dodgeball was, while also being like, yeah, but that was kind of messed up, wasn't it? Like
Mhm.
it kind of does both, and I really, really appreciated that about it, because it'd be really easy for the film to just kind of do the modern day thing and just attack everything it sees.
Right.
It just
I
kind
did
of
a lot.
wears it more as like of like this just is what it was, and this is just here it is, like go live in it.
Right.
Like
And I
this
did
is what it
love.
would be like for a modern character to kind of have to live in this world or whatever.
There you go. Yeah, I was gonna say I did love how Jamie I mean, that was my favorite parts of her character was when she was in the 80s and she
Yeah.
was kind of witnessing all this like, taboo, if you will, stuff that would be taboo now at least. And she was just kind of like raise her eyebrow, or she would have a funny kind of quip about them saying something they really shouldn't say, or whatever. So it was
Yeah.
kind of like had that commentary on it, but that's not what the movie was about. Do you know what I mean? So I kind of agree with you there. I did like that aspect of it because they could have, went at that from a very different way.
Yeah, I think it's I like I said, I had a lot of fun with it. I liked the past. They changed it up. They didn't just play it out in the way that it played out in originally, because she
Yeah.
changed things. I liked that. I wasn't really expecting that. Like I said, I'm not a fan of how the Doug thing kind of came out of left field, but I mean, Hollywood, not all podcasters. I mean, Gerald decide obviously, but not
Sure.
all podcasters are just creepy conspiracy theorists who are like just like psycho, insane, whatever's
Mhm.
like, it's come on, like give us
Yeah.
give us a little bit of a break here. Every time.
Yeah.
The funny thing too is like you think about how many like Hollywood stars are podcasters now. Like how many of
Mhm.
them have their own podcasts, but yet this is what Hollywood thinks of podcasting as an
I know.
industry. We're
I
all
know.
just like, I mean, think about like was it Kong v Godzilla? Was that the movie where the dude was like a conspiracy nut job, and like
Yep. And then Halloween
Halloween 2018?
2018.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we like where they have like the one microphone 47,000 feet away for the interview.
In a bunch of rustling leaves. Yeah, I know
Yeah,
that works.
yeah, it's
All
like
right. Well, there.
God, just stop it, Hollywood. Stop it. Like every time there's a podcaster in a movie, anytime that's your bad guy, that's your killer, that's your creep, that's your whatever. And if it's a podcaster, done, they're gonna be like the crazy dumb one.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's starting to shape up that way. I saw this guy on camera. I'm like, and on top of that, he's doing a true crime podcast. I'm like, oh God, there's something with this dude.
Even worse.
So yeah. There you go. That was our review of Totally Killer. 7 from Nick and a 5 from me, which puts it at a 6 overall from the P's. Nick,
get it.
we're doing Saw X, and then we're doing Five Nights at Freddy's in the next couple weeks. I'm interested because I don't know, man. I didn't expect you to give this a 7, and I know you love the Saw film, so I don't really know what to expect with that. Either you're going to be super over hypercritical of it and give it a shitty score, or it's going to fit with what you want it to do. I don't know. But anyway, I'm excited to see, and I'm
I didn't see
surprised.
Spiral. I never saw Spiral, the Chris Rock one.
No, I didn't
And
either.
like the last movie I saw was it Jigsaw? Was that what it was called? And it was like they made the movie and they're like, no, we swear it's not going to just be another Jigsaw apprentice. But then you get to the end of the movie and it's a Jigsaw apprentice, and it's
Yeah.
like just stop this nonsense. So now like they're jumping back in time. I mentioned this I think on the show a couple weeks ago. I really don't know where the story is here to tell. I'm really, really curious as to why they decided to do this, unless they really just wanted to bring Tobin Bell back.
Yeah.
Like that's the only real thing I can think of here is like they really just wanted to bring Tobin Bell back, and they were
That's
tired
what I'm
of like
thinking.
the Costas Mandalores of the universe just stinking up the
That's what I'm
place.
thinking. That's
So
what I'm thinking.
maybe like I don't know. Like, are they going to bring Carrie Elways back? Like, because obviously he was in the first Saw movie, and then Saw 3. Was it Saw 3D where they revealed he was helping them all along?
I think
But
so.
only it was like an end of the movie kind of thing or something. Whatever. I don't know. I'm not.
We'll see.
I'm way more intrigued for Five Nights at Freddy's. I'm really
wow,
really
okay.
hyped for that movie. Like I said, I really feel like it looks like a movie that's gonna like again have its tongue planted firmly in its
Yeah.
cheek and having a lot of fun with its source material, and that like really kind of interests me. It really really does.
I'm excited. We'll give them a go. But before we get there and before we end this episode, we head over to the comments section to see what the fans had to say. Now, we dig in there and we let the fans ask us a question, Nick, and we each get to pick one to answer on air here. Do you have the questions there, buddy?
Yeah, I got him.
All right, man. Yeah, let's see. You want to go first because I actually haven't picked one yet. I'm going to look through them right now.
So G Money, I took a look through the questions, and as usual, we've already kind of touched on a couple of them before we get in here. But I'm gonna, God, I hate to say his name even, but Brad Hargis, our good buddy from the Cinema Guys, he also hosted some show about Apple
It's
iPods.
on hiatus. I hear
it's like an iPod centric show, like they reviewed iPod shuffle songs or something like that.
That's right, yeah.
But one of his questions was, so first of all, I'm gonna steal two because I can. He said, "How do you feel about all these stories getting turned into horror films? Freak Friday, Groundhog Day, Back to the Future, which you've already talked about a lot with the Happy Death Day and the Freaky, and everything like that." So I feel like we've kind of addressed that one necessarily. But he also asked, "What other films would you turn into a horror movie?"
Yeah, that was my question too. I was going to use, but go ahead.
I mean,
you have one.
I know we talked about it. We talked about it when we talked about Dumb Money. But like, imagine a movie like The Social Network was a slasher movie or something.
Sure,
like
yeah.
Like you really got like they're trying to sue him because he like stole their property, but then all of a sudden like all the people in the lawsuit keep turning up dead or something like that. I don't know. I don't really have any space to play around with there, and I just I was looking back at like other stuff that we'd done recently, trying to think of like, what would be good here? What would work here? I don't know. Like, I mean, there's any number of like different things that you could potentially do with something like this. Ooh, I was watching like clips from it earlier. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Yeah.
But instead they go into your mind and they're killing your memories. Like it's a brutal, I mean, it's already kind of a brutal thing anyway, but like they're in there hacking and slashing up at people in your memories and stuff, killing them to try to like take over your body or something. Whatever. You write the rest of the story. I don't know.
Yeah, it
like
could work.
It's fertile ground to do anything with anything, I think. I think you could have a lot of fun with any of these kind of films.
Let me touch on that too, because that was going to be my question, but then I'll pick another one. But real quick, I was just going to say The Wizard of Oz as a horror movie. Like, I mean, that's like prime, like
that's not already a horror movie.
I mean, it kind of is, to be honest. At least it probably was written a little bit more horror than it ended up being on the screen in 1939. But yeah, Wizard of Oz is what I would say. So I'm going to pick a different one then, because this is a loaded question as usual from Jared Taylor, Destruction in Human Form, patron of the show. But he says, what was a better decade for slasher films, the 80s or the 90s? That is a really, really good question. And
I'm going to take a break, guys. He's going to be here for like hours now.
I'm going to answer it. I'm going to answer off the top of my head because that question requires a lot of research. But I think it's probably the 90s, because I think if you're talking quantity, then it's the 80s, because it was like the explosion for horror, and like every other movie was a slasher movie. And, you know, it's just literally a million of them happened in the 80s. But when it comes to like quality, I feel like we started to get some really quality slashers in the 90s that were really, really good. I mean, we've talked about Scream several times tonight, and even some of those like franchises like the Nightmare on Elm Streets of the world and the Friday the 13th of the world, like they started to get better production value and better effects. And so I'm going to say the 90s is a better slasher era, even though I love my 80s slashers. Do you have anything?
All the 80s slasher fans just unsubscribed, discontinued. They're like, we're out of here. We're out of here.
First, I didn't like Totally Killer, where she goes back to 87, and now I'm trashing 80s slashers. What the hell is wrong with me?
Oh.
What am I doing?
Dare you?
I gotta take my horror guy sign down, I guess. I don't know.
I really don't know. I really don't have a good educated guess to say. I mean, if you were just to like off the cuff, I would say the 90s probably as well.
Yeah.
And that's just a personal thing, because I just enjoy, like, I really like Scream and I really like those kinds of things. 80s slasher movies do not really do anything for me. Like, obviously this has got a lot of influences in some of those movies, playing around in that space, of course. But I don't really. Yeah, I would say the 90s though, because I mean, I'm just not really a big fan. I'm not like a big Nightmare on Elm Street person. I'm not like a big like Friday the 13th person. Like those kinds of movies just don't do anything for me. So
I love watching you because we're on video right now. For those that don't know, but I love watching you talk about horror. I'm just like watching you. It makes me feel so good. I'm like, he's breaking down horror.
Help me, help
You're
me, please.
welcome. You're
Help
welcome,
me.
buddy. All right, guys. As we lead up to Halloween, we got a couple more horror related reviews coming up next week. We will be doing Saw X, a franchise that Nick is very close to. I casually enjoy it. I love the first one, and then from there it was kind of like there was some good scenes and stuff, but nothing ever affected me like the first one did. So I've just kind of been casually enjoying them throughout
I'm
the
intrigued
years.
to know what the twist is in this one. That's the one thing.
Mhm.
And whenever you think about a Saw movie, all you can think about is what's the twist going to be. But with them jumping back in time, I'm like, I don't know what twist you're going to make that's going to be like any good, unless it please God help me. It's just going to set up another Jigsaw apprentice somehow. You know it's gonna. Like, you know that's the space it's going to play in.
Sure.
Like, one of these people that he put in the traps is like secretly like gonna still be alive to like carry on his legacy, and like we're gonna get 10 more Saw movies with all these other random
we'll
people
see.
who aren't Tobin Bell.
I mean, we'll see. I
I'm
don't
very
know.
apprehensive about it. I really am. I'm like,
All right.
I do love the Saw movies, but I'm going into it with very low expectations, knowing the things that have come immediately before.
Okay. So tune in next week, guys. We'll be reviewing Saw X, and then the following week, which will be it'll be released on Halloween, I think, or maybe the day after Halloween, is Five Nights at Freddy's. We'll be checking that one out, and that'll wrap up October for us. Nick, I appreciate it. The discussion, it was totally killer, brother. Thanks for being here, man.
I'm not coming back next week.